Have you ever stood in the grocery store aisle, stared at a product, and thought, who in the world approved this name? Well, you're not alone. Over the years, companies have unleashed some truly bizarre product names onto unsuspecting consumers. Names that were either hilariously bad, downright confusing, or, in some cases, unintentionally offensive. And today, we're going to dive into some of the worst offenders. Buckle up, because you won't believe some of these actually made it to store shelves. Let's kick things off with a classic, Colgate kitchen entrees. Yes, you heard that right. Colgate, the company famous for making toothpaste, once decided it was a good idea to branch out into frozen dinners. Back in the 1980s, Colgate thought, hey, people trust us with their dental hygiene. Why not their dinner plates, too? Spoiler alert, people were not interested in eating anything that reminded them of minty fresh breath. Unsurprisingly, Colgate kitchen entrees were a colossal failure and quietly disappeared from store shelves almost as quickly as they arrived. But Colgate wasn't the only company to make a head-scratching move. Enter Clairol Touch of yogurt shampoo. Launched in the late 1970s, this product was part of Clairol's attempt to capitalize on the health food craze. The problem? When people hear yogurt, they think of breakfast, not something to slather on their scalps. And to make matters worse, some consumers thought it was a food product and tried to eat it. Needless to say, the product was pulled faster than you can say, I'll have a parfait, hold the shampoo. Now, let's talk about AIDS-reducing candy. This one is a tragic case of bad timing. AIDS was a popular appetite suppressant candy in the 1970s and early 80s, and it actually did pretty well, until the mid-1980s, when the AIDS epidemic became a global health crisis. Despite the obvious phonetic similarity, the company initially resisted changing the name, thinking the association wouldn't impact sales. But as the epidemic grew, sales plummeted, and eventually, the company rebranded. Unfortunately, the damage was already done, and the product faded into obscurity. Now, bad product names aren't just an American phenomenon. Let's hop across the pond to the UK, where we find Zit Lemonade. Yes, in the 1970s, some marketing genius thought naming a refreshing lemon drink after facial blemishes was a brilliant idea. Imagine quenching your thirst with a cool, fizzy Zit. Sounds appetizing, right? Predictably, this one didn't last long, and consumers quickly moved on to drinks that didn't remind them of teenage angst. And then there's Mini Poo Shampoo. Yes, you heard that correctly. Mini Poo Shampoo was an actual dry shampoo from the 1960s, marketed as a quick and easy way to refresh your hair without washing it. Now, dry shampoo is a great invention, but the name Mini Poo doesn't exactly scream clean and fresh. If anything, it sounds like the opposite of what you want in a hair product. The company eventually realized the problem, but by then, the damage was done, and Mini Poo was flushed from the shelves. Of course, the tech world isn't immune to bad names either. Remember the Nintendo Wii? When Nintendo announced the Wii in 2006, the world did a collective double take. Wii? People asked. Like, P? The jokes practically wrote themselves. But here's the twist. Despite the name, the Wii became one of Nintendo's best-selling consoles of all time. So, sometimes a bad name doesn't hold a good product back. But not every tech company is that lucky. Take Microsoft's Zune, for example. Launched in 2006 as a competitor to the iPod, the Zune had a name that sounded more like a sci-fi character than a sleek, portable music player. Add to that a clunky interface and a lack of compelling features, and the Zune quickly became a punchline in the tech world. By 2011, Microsoft pulled the plug, and the Zune became a cautionary tale of what happens when you combine bad branding with an underwhelming product. Sometimes, companies accidentally offend without even realizing it, like Sus Pants. This was an actual clothing brand, and if you're wondering why it sounds funny, just imagine someone asking, "Hey, Do these sus pants make me look suspicious? It turns out that sus wasn't always internet slang for something shady, but once it caught on, the brand name became unintentionally hilarious. Needless to say, they weren't exactly flying off the shelves. Eventually, the company abandoned the name, leaving us with one less suspicious-sounding clothing option. And let's not forget barf detergent from Iran. In Persian, barf means snow, which makes perfect sense for a detergent that promises sparkling clean clothes. But for English speakers, the name conjures up less than fresh imagery. Despite the unfortunate name, barf detergent is still sold today, proving that sometimes a bad name isn't enough to sink a product, at least not in its home market. Now let's talk snacks. Anyone remember Soylent? Soylent is a meal replacement drink launched in 2014, and it's still around today. But the name? It's a nod to the 1973 sci-fi film Soylent Green, where, spoiler alert, the food product is made from people. Not exactly the most appetizing reference for something you're supposed to drink. Yet, Soylent has built a loyal following, proving that even a name associated with cannibalism can find its niche. And who could forget fart bars? These chocolate bars were marketed in Germany under the name Fart, which, in German, doesn't carry the same flatulent connotation as it does in English. But tourists couldn't help but giggle at the idea of buying a sweet treat with such a gassy name. Remember the bone phone? No, this isn't some weird medical device. It was actually a wearable radio from the late 1970s. The bone phone was a neck-worn radio that transmitted sound through bone conduction, which was kind of innovative at the time. But the name? Yikes. It sounded less like a futuristic gadget and more like something you'd find in a very different type of store. Despite the name, the product had a brief moment of success, but it quickly faded into obscurity. Now, let's talk about one of the most unintentionally hilarious product names in dental care: prophylactic toothbrushes. In the early 20th century, the term prophylactic simply meant preventative. So, a toothbrush that prevents cavities was naturally called a prophylactic toothbrush. Makes sense, right? Well, by the mid-20th century, the word prophylactic had become widely associated with something very different: condoms. Suddenly, prophylactic toothbrush sounded a lot less like a dental product and more like something you'd find in the pharmacy's other aisle. Unsurprisingly, the name eventually disappeared, but not before raising plenty of eyebrows. And who remembers Gee, Your Hair Smells Terrific shampoo? This overly enthusiastic shampoo name from the 1970s might have sounded fun, but it quickly became a mouthful to say. Imagine having to ask for it at the store. Excuse me, where do you keep the Gee, Your Hair Smells Terrific shampoo? Despite its awkward name, the product did have a cult following and even made a brief comeback in the early 2000s. So, what's the worst product name you've ever come across? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. As always, thank you for watching. See you on the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.